I'm not mad, I need my wife! I'm not mad, I need my wife!
In a quiet village surrounded by green hills lived a man named Nuru, known by everyone as the Madman. His mind had been broken by a painful past, and the villagers feared him. But Amina, a woman as kind as she was beautiful, saw something different. Where others saw madness, she saw a wounded man still worthy of love. This is the story of a man the world rejected and the woman who refused to abandon him. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe, like and share. Your support helps us tell more stories. The village of Kafra rested quietly between rolling green hills and a slow, winding river that glistened beneath the African sun. In the mornings, the air smelled of wood smoke and fresh cassava. Women walked dusty paths with clay pots balanced on their heads, children chased goats through narrow compounds, and the old men gathered beneath the great Iroko tree to debate the matters of the world. Life moved slowly in Kafra. The seasons arrived faithfully, the market filled every fifth day, and the river continued its ancient journey through the land. Yet among the familiar rhythms of village life, there was one figure who did not belong to its peace. His name was Nuru. Some called him by name, but most simply referred to him in hushed voices as the Madman. Nuru wandered through the village like a drifting shadow. His clothes were worn and dusty, his hair tangled by weeks of neglect. Often he walked barefoot along the red earth roads, murmuring words no one could quite understand. Sometimes he laughed suddenly at nothing. Other times he stared into empty space as though he were listening to voices carried by the wind. Children watched him with wide, curious eyes. Mothers pulled them gently aside. "Stay away from him," they warned softly. The elders under the Iroko tree shook their heads whenever he passed. "Once that man was different," one of them would say. "Yes," another replied. "Before life broke him." What had shattered Nuru's mind was a story the village only spoke of in fragments. Some said grief had swallowed him whole. Others believed tragedy had followed him like a shadow. Whatever the truth was, the man who walked the village roads now seemed trapped somewhere between memory and silence. But there was one person in Kafra who did not turn away when Nuru passed. Her name was Amina. Amina was known throughout the village for her quiet beauty. Her skin carried the warm glow of the evening sun, and her eyes held a calm strength that made people trust her without knowing why. She moved through the village with grace, greeting elders with respect and helping neighbors without hesitation. Yet the most surprising thing about Amina was not her beauty. It was her loyalty. From the very first day she met Nuru, she had seen something the others could not. Beneath the scattered words, beneath the restless wandering and distant gaze, Amina believed there was still a man inside him, hurt, lost but not gone. When Nuru walked through the village, she greeted him kindly. When others laughed or whispered, she remained silent. And when he sat alone beneath the mango tree near the river, it was often Amina who came to sit beside him. The villagers watched this with disbelief. At the evening market, whispers moved like wine through dry leaves. Why would a woman like her choose a man like him? She is wasting her life. Love cannot grow where madness lives. But Amina paid no attention to their words. She had seen the rare moments when Nuru's eyes became clear, when the confusion lifted for just a heartbeat and something gentle appeared behind them. In those brief moments, she glimpsed the man he had once been. And that was enough for her. The village continued to whisper, the rumors drifting through compounds and market stalls like restless spirits. But Amina remained where she had always been, right beside the man the world had already given up on. Night settled gently over the village of Kafra, wrapping the land in a quiet darkness softened by the silver glow of the moon. The noise of the day slowly faded. The market fires had gone cold, the goats had been tied for the night, and distant drums from another village echoed faintly across the hills like a slow heartbeat of the land. Above the village, the sky stretched wide and endless, scattered with 1,000 shining stars. Near the riverbank, beneath an old mango tree whose branches leaned toward the water, Amina sat quietly beside Nuru. The river moved slowly that night, its surface reflecting the moonlight like broken glass drifting through the current. Crickets sang from the tall grasses, and the air carried the cool scent of wet earth and distant rain. Nuru sat close to the water's edge, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands trembling slightly as if invisible memories still passed through them. His eyes were fixed on the river, watching it flow as though the moving water carried pieces of his past away. Amina watched him carefully. She had learned to read the silent language of his moods, the tightening of his jaw, the distant look in his eyes, the quiet storms that sometimes passed through him without warning. But tonight felt different. There was a stillness in him, a fragile calm she had not seen in many days. She spoke softly, careful not to break the moment. "Nuru." He did not answer immediately, but she noticed the slight shift of his head. "The future is still ours," she continued gently. "We may not know what it will look like, but we will face it together." The words floated into the quiet night and settled between them like something fragile. For a long moment, the river answered with its soft, endless whisper. Then Nuru slowly turned his head. His eyes met hers. For a brief moment, just a flicker, the confusion inside them cleared like clouds parting in the sky. Something familiar appeared there, something human and painfully aware. Recognition. His lips moved slowly, as if the words had to travel a long distance before reaching his voice. "I will protect you, Amina." The sentence came out almost like a breath. "Even from myself." Amina felt a quiet ache rise in her chest, the kind that carried both love and sorrow together. She reached for his trembling hands and held them gently in hers. His skin was rough from wandering the dusty roads, but she held on firmly, as though grounding him to the earth beneath them. "You are not your madness, Nuru," she said softly. Her voice carried a calm certainty that the world had never given him. "You are the man I love." The wind moved through the mango tree above them, rustling the leaves like a quiet blessing. Somewhere far away, a night bird called into the darkness. Nuru lowered his head slightly, staring at their hands as if he were trying to remember what it felt like to belong somewhere. For a long time, neither of them spoke. But something important passed between them that night, something stronger than the whispers of the village and stronger than the shadows inside Nuru's mind. Silent promise. A promise that no matter how uncertain tomorrow might be, no matter how long the road ahead might stretch, they would walk it side by side. The future remained unknown. But beneath the vast African sky, beside the endless river, two souls chose not to face it alone. The days that followed passed slowly, heavy with quiet tension. In the village of Kafra, life continued as it always had. Women swept the red earth in front of their homes each morning. Farmers carried their hoes toward distant fields. Children ran laughing along the dusty paths that wound between mud houses and mango trees. But for Nuru, peace seemed to slip further away with every passing day. The calm he had found by the river that night with Amina did not last long. His mind, like a restless storm, returned again to confusion and wandering thoughts. Some mornings he woke before the sun, pacing the narrow footpaths of the village with anxious steps. Other times he sat silently beneath the mango tree, staring into space as if chasing memories no one else could see. The villagers noticed the change. Whispers began to move again through the market stalls and cooking fires. "Madness never sleeps," one old woman murmured. "Poor Amina," another replied. "She deserves a better life." Even when Amina walked through the village with her head held high, she could feel their eyes following her. Their words floated through the air like dust carried by harmattan winds. At night, when the village grew quiet, those whispers sometimes crept into her thoughts. And for the first time since she had chosen to stand beside Nuru, a small seed of doubt found its way into her heart. Not doubt about her love, but doubt about whether love alone could save him. Then one morning Nuru was gone. His sleeping mat inside Amina's small compound lay empty. The calabash bowl he used for water sat untouched beside the doorway. Even the old wooden stool where he sometimes rested was pushed slightly aside, as if he had risen before the first light of dawn and walked away without a word. The silence he left behind felt heavy. Amina's heart began to race. She searched the familiar places first: the mango tree by the river, the dusty path that led toward the farms, the quiet edge of the village where Nuru sometimes wandered when his mind grew restless. But he was nowhere. Then a cold thought crossed her mind. There was one place where Nuru often went when the shadows inside him became too loud: the old temple on the hill. The temple had stood long before many of the village houses were built. Its stone walls were cracked and weathered by time, its roof partly fallen, vines slowly creeping over its ancient structure. The elders said it once belonged to forgotten traditions from generations past. Now it stood abandoned, place of silence, a place where troubled thoughts could grow louder. Amina climbed the narrow path leading up the hill, her breath quick and uneven. The wind grew stronger as she reached the top, rustling through tall grasses that swayed like restless spirits. And then she saw him. Nuru stood near the edge of the hill, where the land dropped sharply into a wide valley below. His back was turned to her, his shoulders stiff, his gaze fixed on the open space before him. He looked small against the vast sky. For a moment, Amina felt fear tighten in her chest. "Nuru," she called softly. He did not turn immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded distant, almost hollow. "I'm a curse, Amina." The words drifted through the wind like something broken. "I was never meant to be loved." He slowly turned his head, his eyes carrying a deep exhaustion. "I will only drag you down with me." Amina felt her heart shatter at the weight of his pain. But she did not stop walking. Step by step, she moved closer to him, her voice steady even as tears filled her eyes. "Nuru," she said quietly, "you are my heart." Another step closer. "You are my soul." The wind rushed around them, pulling at her dress as she stood before him. "And I will not leave you, no matter the darkness you face." For a long moment, Nuru simply stared at her. Something fragile moved across his face, like a crack forming in a wall that had stood for too long. Then slowly, almost uncertainly, he reached out his hand. Amina took it without hesitation. And in that quiet moment on the hill, a small piece of light found its way back into Nuru's world. The morning Nuru returned to the village felt different. The sun rose slowly above the green hills of Kafra, spilling soft golden light across the red earth paths and quiet compounds. Roosters called from behind woven fences, and thin smoke from cooking fires curled gently into the sky. Life in the village was beginning another ordinary day. But for Nuru, nothing about the day was ordinary. He walked beside Amina down the narrow path that led from the hill back toward the village. His steps were slow and uncertain, like a man learning to walk again after a long illness. The night before had left something fragile but important inside him, a quiet moment of clarity he had not felt in many years. Amina walked beside him without speaking. Her hand held his firmly, not as someone trying to control him, but as someone reminding him he was not alone. The path twisted between tall grasses and scattered stones. Birds darted between tree branches as the early breeze carried the smell of wet soil and distant farms. When the first houses of Kafra appeared ahead of them, Nuru hesitated. The village had always been a place where eyes followed him, where whispers traveled faster than the wind. For years he had walked those roads like a stranger among people who had already decided who he was. But this time he did not turn away. He kept walking. Amina felt the tension in his hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. And together they stepped back into the village. The first people to see them were two women sweeping the ground outside their compound. Their brooms slowed as they watched Nuru pass. One of them leaned closer to the other, whispering something behind her hand. But this time, Nuru did not lower his head. He simply continued walking. Days turned into weeks, and slowly the rhythm of life began to change. Nuru no longer wandered the village roads aimlessly. Instead, he started helping where he could. First, the tasks were small. carrying firewood for an elderly neighbor, fetching water from the river, repairing a broken fence near the farm road. The work was simple, but it gave his restless hands something to do. It gave his mind moments of quiet. Some villagers still watched him with suspicion, unsure whether the change would last. Others remained silent, remembering too well the strange man who once spoke to shadows and wandered without purpose. But something about Nuru was different now. There was effort in his movements. There was determination in the way he faced each day. And always beside him was Amina, the woman many had once called foolish, the woman they had pitied. Yet as the days passed, it became clear that Amina was neither foolish nor weak. She had carried a strength that few people in the village truly understood. She had believed in something when no one else could see it. And now that belief was slowly taking shape. Even Nuru began to feel the change within himself. There were still moments when confusion returned, moments when old memories drifted through his mind like distant storms. Healing was not a straight road, and some days were harder than others. But now he had something he never had before, a reason to keep walking forward. Each evening, when the sun sank behind the hills and the sky turned deep orange, Nuru and Amina often returned to the riverbank where their promise had begun. They sat beneath the mango tree, watching the water flow endlessly toward the horizon. Their life was still fragile, still uncertain, but it was real. And with every passing day, the bond between them grew stronger, forged by patience, loyalty, and quiet courage. The village that once spoke only in whispers was beginning to witness something unexpected. The slow rebirth of a man they once believed was lost forever. Beyond the shadows, time, like the slow river that passed through the village of Kafra, continued its quiet journey forward. Seasons changed. The rains came and washed the red earth clean. The dry season followed, bringing dusty winds and long golden afternoons beneath a burning sun. Children who once chased goats through the market square grew taller. New houses rose where old ones had fallen. The village lived, breathed, and moved gently through the passing years. And with time, something remarkable happened. The whispers that once followed Nuru began to fade. Where people had once spoken his name with pity or suspicion, they now spoke it with something closer to respect. First, the change came slowly. Nuru had spent years rebuilding himself piece by piece. His healing had never been sudden. Some days had been quiet victories, helping a farmer repair a broken roof before the rains arrived, carrying heavy baskets for the women returning from the market, sitting patiently beside an elderly man who needed company beneath the great Irako tree. Other days had been harder. There were still moments when old shadows returned, when memories rose from the depths of his mind like distant thunder. But those storms no longer swallowed him whole. Each time they came, he faced them with the quiet strength he had learned beside Amina. The villagers saw this. They watched a man who had once wandered aimlessly now rise before sunrise to work beside them in the fields. They watched him laugh with the children who once feared him. They watched him stand beside his wife with a calm pride that no whisper could shake. And slowly, their judgment softened. One evening in the market square, an old elder spoke what many had begun to feel. "That man," he said, nodding toward Nuru in the distance, "has fought a battle most of us cannot see." The others nodded quietly. And he did not fight it alone. Everyone understood who the elder meant. Mina. For years she had carried the weight of the village's doubt. She had walked through the market while others whispered behind her back. She had chosen love when it would have been easier to walk away. But time had revealed something powerful in her choice. She had not been foolish. She had been brave. Together, Nuru and Amina became something more than just husband and wife in the eyes of the village. They became a quiet symbol of patience, loyalty, and resilience, the kind of story people told their children when speaking about the strength of the human heart. Yet for Nuru and Amina, life remained beautifully simple. They built a small home near the edge of the village, close enough to hear the river when the wind was calm. A mango tree grew beside their courtyard, its branches stretching wide enough to cast a cool shade during the hottest afternoons. Some evenings they worked side by side in their small garden. Other nights they sat quietly beneath the tree, listening to the distant sounds of the village settling into sleep. And often they returned to the riverbank where their promise had first taken shape. One evening, many years after the darkest days had passed, the sky burned with deep orange and crimson as the sun began its slow descent beyond the hills. The river shimmered beneath the fading light, carrying the colors of the sunset across its moving surface. Nuru and Amina sat together on the smooth stones near the water. The air was calm, filled with the soft hum of evening insects and the distant laughter of children playing somewhere in the village. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the sun sink lower, the sky gradually turning softer, deeper, more peaceful. Then Nuru turned toward her. There was something steady in his eyes now, something that had not always been there. The restless confusion that once lived inside them had been replaced by a quiet clarity shaped by years of patience and love. His voice carried the calm weight of a man who had traveled a long road. "You saved me, Amina." The words were simple, but they held the memory of everything they had endured together. "You pulled me from the darkness when I could not find my way out." He looked out at the river again, his expression thoughtful. "And for as long as I breathe," he continued softly, "I will love you with everything I am." Amina felt tears gather gently in her eyes, not from sadness but from the deep, quiet fullness of the life they had built together. She reached for his hand, the same way she had done so many years ago on the hill when everything had nearly been lost. But this time her touch carried peace instead of fear. She leaned her head gently against his shoulder. "We saved each other, Nuru," she whispered. Her voice was warm, steady, and certain. "And we always will." The sun finally slipped below the hills, leaving the sky painted in soft shades of purple and fading gold. For a moment the entire world seemed to pause, as though the earth itself was breathing slowly in the quiet evening. Beside the flowing river, beneath the wide African sky, Nuru and Amina sat together in silence. The shadows of the past had not disappeared completely, but they no longer ruled their lives. For beyond those shadows, they had discovered something stronger, something steady, patient, and enduring. The quiet, unbreakable light of love. Please like and subscribe for more stories.